So I'd like to begin today first with us taking a deep breath. Feet please not crossed. And our goal is to center. Now today, this topic would best be said as developing a higher level of consciousness. And I have found in my life that centering, even in difficult, in fact, especially in difficult circumstances, helps me make a better decision, helps me with the right words or lack of words. Centering is our chance for that moment to be outside of ego, outside of self. And although I see you with my eyes, my presence is really here. And if we would take one more breath, and if you would just visualize yourself here, and then let's all meet there. Today is one of those wonderful lectures for me. I hope to have more of as a conversation rather than just straight lecture. More of the invisible world and how this invisible world is dependent on us as we are dependent on them for our own well-being. Yesterday we talked at length about our physical balance and how important it was that we not only chose the right fluids to consume, foods to consume, exercise to flush the body, thoughts, mental thoughts. After yesterday, before you went to sleep, just privately for a moment, think of what you were thinking. What were your words before you slept? My goal, of course, is that your words are of gratitude, gratitude to be here. As we mentioned yesterday, we are incarnating, and this is a very important life, this one that I have, the one that you have. This is where growth occurs. Once this life is over, we then wait for another opportunity. The term I didn't use yesterday that I grew up using was higher self. I mean, Mother would say to me, well, Robyn, what's your higher self say? I always didn't like that one necessarily, because usually when she was asking me that, it was because maybe I was doing something that I maybe ought not to be doing. But when we are centered and when we are one with the true me, I present all that I am, all incarnations of who I am. And I'm also in respect of what I have now so that I can gain and further this path that I'm on. Honestly, I haven't seen any angel wings, so I think we're all incarnating. I think that we've all known very great people, but I also think we're on a humanity. We are on a path. When I speak of higher self, today I'm trying to take a few notes that I can pay attention to. I had that lovely notebook yesterday and I simply got lost, and not that it was anything wrong, but afterwards I thought, gee, why did I bother? I mean, so today I took a few notes so that I could at least stay on task. When I speak of the higher self, that is my direction. I was blessed in this life at a very young age, knowing what my path was. Simply, just, it was like forged in stone. When we would go, you know, you'd see someone who would read a poem. Oh, you know what you're doing. I mean, it's just like, boom. I expect that, I've said in jest, that I hope one day that I'm still practicing and that I just, poof, gone. Don't want to alarm the patient, but, you know, they'll also say, oh, bless her on her way. So this path that I'm on is forged. It just keeps expanding. I'm here primarily because of Linda Jo. She was my champion. She decided several years ago she wanted for me to be exactly where I am. I didn't think I would be here, but you just don't turn her down. And Linda Jo, for those of you who know her, and I still speak of her as the living because she's such a living, breathing person for me. She sends her blessings, her greetings, and she's extremely happy, and she's extremely happy with her incarnation. So, you know, those of you who knew her, she had a very difficult few years, but she's very pleased and happy with all that she did. And I'm not speaking out of turn. She gave me permission that I may use her in any form, that if it could help another person, then she said, then it is worth those words. Let's speak a moment about energy. We have two kinds of energy. When we're talking about universal consciousness, energy is a very important concept. We have renewable energy, and that renewable energy occurs when we eat good foods, and when we get good rest, when we get good sleep. But we also have core energy. When we're born, I like to think of the core as a tube. I don't know why I always think of it as a tube, but I think of myself or young children with this big, nice, full tube. Well, as we age, of course, we definitely use our core. But we also, you all have had the experience of saying, I am just so exhausted. I have been burning the candle at both ends. Now, your core energy is non-renewable. That's what's telling you how long you're going to be here in this life. As I mentioned before, I think because of my genetics, well, no, I have burned the candle at a few ends, but mostly I do honor that energy. And in my work, I honor it. I am very happy to work with you, but I am very careful also of my energy so that I'm not using my energy, but rather this energy. Harry was really insistent. Harry Van Gelder was my mentor, Leonie's father, and Dora Kuntz's brother. And Harry was always, you know, rapping me because I was using my own, and still does from time to time. It's important that we don't use our core. My advice to you is to be respectful of this life you're leading. You do wish to be here. You have things to impart. You have nuggets of wisdom for those who are younger. You have information that's valuable. And if you use your core energy, you don't get to be here as long. So the renewable, that's good. That's the good food we eat, the good water we drink. But that core we want to be respectful for. That means that, you know, when you know you've hit the core, it's time to go meditate or take a nap. And my goal for you is that you reach the point with meditation that it is only a breath that puts you there. That is your goal. You needn't necessarily be in a room joining others, although that is always lovely. But it is just a breath that you can be centered in exactly who you are. That is your goal. I've had, because of my teachers and because of my background and because of the gift I was born with, it is really just a breath away for me. I sometimes forget it because I'm human, but when I don't forget it and I remember, wait, take a breath. That means also that you are in charge and in control of strong emotions. We talked a bit about that yesterday. In developing a higher level of consciousness, there are always those around you who are more muddy, who are more, see, this is the muddy part is a deeper vibration, and it isn't that lovely higher level of vibration. It's pretty base. We all know people who are rather base, and maybe they're a little more difficult to be around. But that doesn't mean you can't influence them, maybe not with your words, but with just your being. And it is amazing when you are centered what you bring out in someone. When my boy was growing up, I taught him, he had obviously being my son, he heard lots of things growing up, although he is upset with me and saying, why didn't you help me develop my clairvoyance? And, so I kind of dropped the ball there. I thought that because I was born with it, that, he would be born with it and that we would just go from there. But, okay, well, I've already apologized to him more than once. But he still is very powerful. He has his own power and his own gifts. He just doesn't always recognize them. Just as I see many gifts out here that you may or may not acknowledge or recognize or have embraced. A very powerful thing, as you have maybe experienced yourself, is the power of visualization. When you are with someone who is difficult, and I mentioned before and yesterday, it's always nice if you visualize them in your meditation with I like white because it's the light that I use, but pink is nice, or a nice blue or a pink. I mean, something pretty, something that just comes to you naturally for that person, then I would use it. But my son must have heard me because he came home one day and he says, oh, Mother, it really, really, really works. My teacher was so cranky. She was so mad at everybody. And I just sat there and I just visualized, and he just said, and all of a sudden she was nice. I thought, boy, wasn't that a great little lesson? He was maybe 7 at the time. So I thought, wow, he'll never forget that one. It's very powerful when you are in line with someone who is being cruel to someone else. Do not engage, center, and just do what you can to send them your happy thoughts. Or if you can't, if they just are so in your face, then turn about and go away. Try not to let them influence you. Sometimes we have trouble with that. Now, I am not a medium, and I do not support it. You need to be very careful when you have gifts as mine. I do not allow others to take over. I do not speak others' voices. This is my voice. These are my experiences. I can only see what I can see, and I can only do what I can do. I do not pretend to be anybody other than who I am. I love Dora's quote when she said, take 3 clairvoyants, put them in a room, and you're going to see 3 different things. Well, you know what? Take 3 of us, put them in a room, and we're going to all describe everybody differently, aren't we? So it's really the same. When you have flashes, the difference sometimes between you and I is that when you have flashes and you see things, you discount it. Well, I've had 60-some years of not discounting it, and I have had many experiences in helping me discern truth from fiction. When you have an experience that you're unsure of, put it on a shelf. Just let it go. Don't discount it. Just set it aside. And in a day or so, look at it again. Was there a truth in that experience? Sometimes it has been for me, several months later, I'll look at that experience and I'll realize the fallacy that might have been around it and also the truth of it. So as you, for instance, I don't analyze dreams. I think it's the emotion of the dream that's important. And if you have things that I always think, my higher self, of course, if you keep pushing on a door that doesn't want to open, well, apparently that's not the door you're supposed to go through. But if those doors just, it's like this whole idea of teaching. It was like I hit the crest of the wave and I couldn't have gotten off of it if I wanted to. I mean, it started at Orcas at the camp in Dralaya, and it's been a wonderful experience for me. What's been wonderful are you. You give me many, many wonderful nuggets. This is what we do for each other. We give each other nuggets, small moments of wisdom, a question, something I hadn't thought of, or just a look of your aura, or just a symbol I hadn't seen before. I don't understand all the symbols, but I understand the feel of them, and I understand what we bring with us. And we, all of us, we're just overlapping. And we're overlapping in such a lovely way. And that centering, even if you didn't feel you were there, we have enough friends around, because we're pretty full here, enough friends around that have helped you. So when you feel this, understand it, respect it, and say, I like this. I mean, do you not? Isn't it lovely? When I'm here, I'm not worried about all kinds of inconsequential things. When I'm here, I'm only seeing what's really important. Harry always used to say that life is far too serious to be taken seriously. Well, it's true. When we are here, well, space and time doesn't, none of that matters. What we're wearing, what our hair looks like, none of that matters. What really matters is that incredible presence that you bring with you, and that incredible presence of which you meet another. We're so lucky to be in this society. We all have service in our hearts. It's so apparent. You all are on your own path, whatever it may be, and with you, you bring that respect of knowledge and that thirst, I think, for a better life. And that better life is this life we're living now, because, well, who knows who she's going to be next time? Maybe she'll be he. I don't know. Gary, do you want to be a girl and I'll be a guy? I don't know. I'm stuck with Gary. Gary's my rock. When I was growing up, speaking of rocks, when I was growing up, my mother was really my balancer, because when you are having so many visions and so many experiences, you absolutely need a rock. And my mother was absolutely my rock. And when I would get up in the morning, I would tell her what my experiences were. And as I was telling her, I could tell the truth of them. Because, of course, I'm a girl, I'm a young girl, and I'm sure there was lots of fantasy in there too. But through it, I learned the truth and the fabric of what I was seeing. When my mother died, when I was in my late 40s, it was just like my world rocked, because my rock was gone. And although Gary and I have always been, my husband and I have always been very close, it took a little bit, and I realized, wait a minute, I have a rock, and that's Gary. It's like he keeps me grounded, because when you have feet in both camps, sometimes it's hard to be grounded. So as you're embarking on your journey, and as you are exploring yourself, and as you are expanding your consciousness, make sure that you are in safety. Make sure you don't go to the mall and do this. Make sure you're in safety, or you are with someone who has your best interest at heart. that they won't use you in a way that would not be helpful for you. So, rocks. We are, as we mentioned yesterday, a product of our challenges. We really know who we are by the challenge we have in front of us. Now, Gary and I had his challenge over 10 years ago when he had it was basically arterioventricular malformation. For those of you who understand it, AVM. Gary was a headache man, and in our bodies we have arterioles, and they become arterioles, and then they become a little complex of capillaries, because that's where the blood oxygen exchange happens, and then it goes out into the venous. Well, he had one right back here in the cerebellum. Now, being a headache man, whenever I'd work on him, I'd always say, gosh, because he had migraines, oh gosh, we just need to relieve that little bulge. Not understanding what I was really feeling at the moment. Not understanding that it was really an AVM that was there the whole time. So it burst. 4.5 months later, I get this man home, and 10 years later, he is this marvelous miracle man. Our challenge, when he was going through this, of course, his challenge was why. And I did my best to figure out, why were we in this journey? Well, I'm very comfortable in the knowledge that Gary, this lifetime, this has been many lifetimes he has had a physical challenge, but this is the first time he lived it. So we're done. Gary, next lifetime we're sailing through. I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to climb mountains, but we're going to do other things. We're not going to have to worry about health issues. Those of you who have health issues, a lot of us do. Those of you, I've been blessed with a very healthy body, but maybe last time I didn't. Those of you who have health issues, you rise to the occasion, you rise to the challenge, and you love yourself with this challenge and say, well, okay, this is what I have. What can I do to help make this life easier? So, like Linda Jo says, so next time I get to come back and do something entirely different. So I don't have to think about that all lifetime. As I mentioned yesterday, we all have helpers. As far as developing a higher level of consciousness, they are also there for us at that level. And they are also our best friends. They are there and cannot interfere unless you say, I need help. And I know that you have prayer, or you have thoughts, or you have mantras. They're very good. You're not being selfish. You're simply saying, I need help. Could I be inspired? Now, you don't have to keep asking the same question over and over. We're not silly and, that short-sighted. In your meditation, you don't have to keep repeating what it is you want, whether it is a path. You know what the direction is. You're simply allowing yourself the opportunity to see or hear or read or be inspired by maybe someone in a grocery line who happens to just say one little thing, and you think, oh, wow, hadn't thought of it that way. Just inconsequential. You're open for it. So these helpers we have, the ones that we bring with us, the ones we've brought through incarnations, or our loved one who passed on, who's still very interested in our well-being and trying to help us, they can't help us unless we ask for it. And it is not selfish to ask. In fact, it's selfish not to. I mean, are you not trying to be the best who you are this particular time? I certainly hope to be the very best, and I don't by any means think that I know everything. Heavens, the good stuff's coming through. It's not what I've kind of thought of. Let's talk a little bit about the invisible world and the importance of the invisible world. As we mentioned yesterday, let's see. Let's start with the Earth. Mother Earth is a vibrant, pulsating entity. I have only once in my life experienced the mother, And it was very powerful, and other than I can tell you I experienced her, I don't know anything else about it. But I have experienced, and we all have, as we're digging in the earth, that feeling of the earth, which is why some of us, lots of us, like digging in the ground. Well, there are all kinds of entities around. The gnomes, basically those little short, squatty fellas, I'm sure they're they're sexless, but I just call them guys because they're just short and squatty and brown and funny. But they're very happy when you're digging, and they're very happy when you're fertilizing, and they're very happy when you're making their ground nice. I have, when my parents moved into a house when I was a teenager, and my mother said, or my dad, one of them said, "Oh, Robyn, will you just tell those gnomes to get rid of the moles?" And so I purposefully went outside, and I kind of found, because they kind of are around in groups, and I said, Mom and Dad would sure like to get rid of the moles. And they looked at me and said, "What's a mole?" So apparently they like moles, because you think about it, moles are bringing air in. So that was the end of it. I said to Mom and Dad, never mind, they don't want it. Fairies, as I mentioned, are the sprites. Now let's talk about, I always call them sprites instead of fairies because they really are very sprite-like. But there are fire sprites, and there are water sprites, and there are sprites with our flowers, and actually the individual flowers, Trillium in the Pacific Northwest, are always attract a sprite, and it's a very unique sprite. There are different rose sprites, and when you're working in your yard, you invite them. I'm inviting helpers. What would you like me to do? And when you get inspired to brush the grass off of something, do it. I used to follow my father around when he was mowing the yard because they wanted the grass off. I mean, it's hard to, they can't move the grass, so I would brush the grass off, all of the little flowers and the leaves and so forth. So invite them to come in, and the more you invite, the more you'll have. Invite the gnomes and give them fertilizer. Say, well, what would you like me to do? I mean, mentally, you don't want to be talking to yourself. People would say you're kind of silly. But, mentally, and as you feel inspired, do so. Water sprites are interesting, and they're larger. And every time, back to all the sprites, every time you admire, every time you say, "Oh, what a beautiful rose," you are sending that out, and they are receiving. So that's where balance, that's where we talked about physical balance, but higher levels, this is where balance is important. So as you are, for instance, at the ocean, I love going to the ocean. I just need that water fix, but the ocean fix, the waves crashing. And they're very happy to have you. And you can always tell the people walking on the ocean who are admiring the ocean and those who are just busy talking and walking and ignoring the ocean. But the ones that are admiring it, you can just see the little spicules coming, boom, boom, kind of back and forth, back and forth. Now, I've never been on an ocean liner, but I'm sure they're much bigger outside. And in polluted waters, we still have the entities, but you don't see the pretty little sprites. They actually shy away from that. When I'm up in Vancouver, BC, there's some bays there, and you have to go out quite a little ways to see them because it's just too polluted. There are, of course, entities trying to clean up and balance everything. But the ones that are in pollution and the ones that are really deep in the ground don't know us. And they're not friendly, and I don't think they know who we are or how to communicate. I mean, when Mount St. Helens erupted, I don't remember the year, but was it 80?
1980,
May of 1980, that's right. Yeah, I just graduated. Good. I happened to see the plume, and I thought, oh gosh, I wonder what all of those, and it was just like this eruption of kind of odd-looking things. Now, I kind of tried to communicate, but I kind of didn't either because it was not like attractive, so I really just observed. But it was interesting how long they stayed out until they just started going back in. So I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. I'm not an expert on this. These are just my experiences with that. There's still plumes coming from Mount St. Helens, but those big, deep ones are no longer there. So it's now settled itself as far as you know, those of you who live in woods, trees, and can create and have their own definite entity. And of course, like the redwoods, if you've ever been in Northern California, that feel of that spiritual, sacred feeling in the woods, which is so similar to that sacred spiritual feeling that we have in our meditation room, as you have sometimes in churches. When I was a girl, my parents would take me to a variety of churches to find out if there were, was there a deva there? And it was interesting. There were several, mostly Catholic and Episcopalian, not so much in others, but a few. So you always knew, so someone knew what they were doing when they were creating this church. And here is this entity who the people praying are filling, and that entity is likewise filling the people under their skirts. I think of them as skirts. The deva really don't have features, neither do the sprites really, even though the many artists' renditions kind of have them. But yet there's a bit like an eye-like, and it's when you connect, you know you're connecting. When we were in Switzerland, the devas of the Swiss Alps were so friendly and so easy to contact and so welcoming. Yet when we were in Nepal, not so much, and I don't understand why. But maybe I just didn't understand why. Not that I couldn't contact, but there was nothing friendly about them. They were really, I don't want to say snobby, but kind of that feeling. Do you know what I mean? Like, ooh, pardon me, but just wondered how you felt, and it wasn't the same as in the, Europe. Swiss Alps, yeah. Oh, the Swiss Alps, Matterhorn, beautiful. Okay, speaking of challenges in our centers. Okay, strong emotions, my rock, breaths. Intent, we discussed intent yesterday. I want to obviously emphasize it again. Intent is important. If you are questioning your path, it is your intent to know the path if you are not on it. And it is through your meditation and your openness that allows you to see what your next path is. When we are in transition, that is our most disruptive time. Our old life doesn't work anymore, but we're not fully in our new life. And we like order, do we not? We like things to be in their place, and we like to know that they're in their place. But when we are in transition, it's like, oh dear. So you maybe try that old life, oh, I didn't like it at all, but oh, this one really isn't quite there. In your meditation, you continue, you know your intent. It's that new life, and you needn't repeat it all the time, but it is something that you are feeding. You are feeding the new life, and then pretty soon the old life is gone and you don't even have to think about it. You want to be careful what you wish for.
Yes.
You want to be very careful what you wish for. I know many who wished for material gains and are not happy souls. I've always been blessed. I've had a roof over my head and food on my plate, and I am so very grateful. And I say thank you. Every time I move my body, I say thank you. My limbs work, my arms work, my brain works. I say thank you that I can center and that I can be clear. Being grateful is a very important part of who we are. It also allows us to accept that little nugget that someone maybe next to you or in line in a grocery store is going to impart upon you. I've had the experience also of, I've mentioned before, helping people who've passed. And there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. When we are empathetic, we are acknowledging another's pain, another's difficulties, another's challenge. But we are not tied into it. If I become tied into it, I can no longer read you. I can no longer give you accurate answers. But if I'm empathetic, I can, that's all we want, isn't it? We just want people to know who we are. We want people to really look at us because it is our eyes that incarnate. I know people who've passed by their eyes. Oh, I know who you are. I don't even remember your name, but I know who you are. I've seen you before. Didn't I know you before? When Osty was passing, I remember Will Rogers, of those who remember Will, was very bald-headed and went in life. And he, as many people came while I was working with Osty, I said, and Osty asked me, okay, so tell me, describe everybody who's here. So I described everyone. I said, oh, he's bald. Is that Will Rogers? And he said, oh, yeah, that's Will. And I said, well, why is he bald? I mean, you'd think, because men, don't you love your hair? I mean, I love my hair. And he said, oh, he didn't care. And anyway, he probably knew you'd never recognize him if he had a full head of hair. So I thought, well, that's kind of interesting because I'm not sure I ever knew Will. I was just a little girl when I ever met Will, so I'm not sure I would have recognized him by eyes. We want to join this society with other societies of like-minded people. And we join them in our meditation. And we join them for the universal truth of brotherhood. For it is brotherhood that will bring peace. Peace will not be in our lifetime, but in an incarnation it will happen. Maybe not our children, but possibly theirs. We will bring in peace. That is how peace will occur. But it is important that we work hard to create our own individual peace, because that peace begets another's. I have time for questions. I think.
Hold on.
I wasn't aware of it, but there was a young man who shot a bunch of people in Colorado, and I saw that on the news last night and this morning, and I wondered what we could do, especially for people like him who apparently just a very invisible young man and sought to become visible.
I think we leave him to the masters. I can do only what I can do, but I know I can help those around, and that's what I would do. In my meditation, I would ask my helpers to ask their helpers, because there's no time, space commitment, they're right there. But I wouldn't try with him. When you have someone who has created such havoc, mindset of illness, and I would not want to attract any of it to me. So I would protect myself from that. I don't know what, did Hitler just implode after he died? People that are horrible, I wouldn't want to try to see who they were. Now, if it were just a mistake, that's something different. But a very deliberate, brutal act, and I feel for his family, and I feel for those around. Grief is a very interesting thing. I had a young man who I had been treating for an automobile accident, a delightful young man named Quasi, and he went through, I'm a chiropractor, and I went through a series of treatments, and a couple of months later he was perfectly fine. My husband and I were in a concert or something, and all of a sudden Quasi's in front of me, and he said, Dr. Finseth, he called me formally, because he's a young man and he always used my name formally, Dr. Finseth, I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble, I'm in trouble. And he had just been killed and he was on fire, and I didn't know what to do. So I visualized a vat of aloe vera. I mean, I didn't know what to do. I'd never experienced anything like that, and I just immersed us both in aloe vera. And then later, of course, I kept contact with him, and he couldn't reach his girlfriend had been driving. He couldn't reach her because she was in such grief and guilt, and he couldn't reach his family because they were in such grief. Because grief is a gray, sticky, it's a barrier. And so he was alone, and I think I worked with him. I can't remember all of it, but I'm sure I asked maybe Grandma Melanie. I was always there and helpful. So someone helped him, and then eventually I kind of forgot about Quasi. One day I was in a restaurant, again with Gary, we were having breakfast, and this young man turned around and looked at me, and I know it was Quasi. I know the eyes, and I know it was just say, hey, I'm okay now. And I thought, oh, good. So, you know, the mention of eyes, you never know. Maybe that person in front of you in line is really your loved one that just wants you to know, hey, I'm okay, you can let go of me now. Any other questions?
Your comment about the renewable and the core energy.
Yes.
I'm not real clear as to how do we know when we're getting into the core energy and when we're in the renewable energy.
That core energy is that deep exhaustion. The one that even with a night's sleep, you still feel totally exhausted. You just remind yourself, the activity I did yesterday wasn't worth that. I've touched it. So you're mindful. Generally, when we hit the core and we acknowledge, oh, I hit the core, you really do avoid it. You, in your next, you're packing for a move or something, you just don't do it. You know what? You can add another day. So it's when you're not refreshed with sleep. And now, I know there are those of you, because I can hear you say, but I have trouble sleeping. Well, sometimes it's just the body's rest it needs. Maybe it doesn't completely fall asleep naturally, but it's still the rest the body needs. And work with professionals if you really have trouble sleeping, because sleep is important for that renewable energy. Does that help explain that?
Yeah, it's beyond physical. Really.
Definitely beyond physical. Yeah. Yeah.
Is it possible for others to tap into our core energy and drain us?
Not our core, but they can certainly tap into the energy. So, when I do this, I am protecting me. This is usually where it comes out, that solar plexus. And when you find yourself just kind of naturally doing that, sometimes not if you're not cold, sometimes you do it when you're cold, no is a very powerful thought. No, you don't allow it. Now, I don't want to say that because I'm getting all kinds of good, wonderful things here, but you know what I'm saying. I have patients that would suck the marrow out of my bones if I let them. So before I even go in to treat them, I protect myself. And I have a variety of things I do for protection. But you can, I always keep the top open, but you know, no, you can't have it. I won't allow you. I won't allow you. And no is very, very powerful. And when you say it mentally, it's amazing. It will shift. It will shift absolutely that person you're talking to or the person who is with you. The people who want to take it are very distressed when in reality they're needing their own personal support, but they don't understand it.
If I under...
Further on that.
Sure.
I have found in situations like that for me to try to solve their problem is not a gift, but to refuse to solve their problem and help them find a way to solve their problem is a real gift.
He's saying to solve their problem is not a gift, but to help them see their own direction to solve their own problem is the gift.
I'm fascinated by the concept of this core that is non-renewable. And I wonder if you have done any sort of focus, whatever, in regard to aging, because if it's truly not renewable, it would make sense of the peculiar phenomena of fatigue. That's a different kind of fatigue as one ages significantly. And when we talk about renewable, is the fatigue always just because the renewable energy isn't getting enough renewal, or does the core get, in effect, used up little by little?
The core does get used up little by little, and at 66 I don't have the same stamina I did at 26. I'd like to think I do, but I don't. And naps are wonderful. I love the little stories of these great minds who said, you know, isn't it Einstein who always took a nap, and a few of those, and I think, okay, that's it. Naps are lovely. Little power naps are just perfectly lovely. No, I think it is the core.
You know, I sort of view the core more like it's a buffer zone. You know, when you're considering chemicals that you can keep adding and adding, and it doesn't show anything but that one last drop, then will crystallize everything. But it has some aspect of renewability to it, not totally, but that somehow you can rebuild a little bit of the buffer zone if you've gotten into it.
Well, let's see, rebuild some of the buffer zone. I have seen people who have little or no core, but they have so much support around them that they are still among the living because the renewal is strong enough that it seems like it's taking over, so maybe there is a buffer zone. My father was at a core a long time ago, and he had a lovely wife who took incredible care of him, and he lived a very long, full life and lived to his mid-90s. And I believe the last year he might not have been as happy, but he was a very happy man. So, but that core was gone a long time ago, and I don't know how long ago, but at least a year before he died. Now, I thought that was fascinating because I kept thinking, gee, Dad, wow. But Ellie, his wife, just did an incredible job. She ironed his boxers. I've never known anyone to iron his boxers. I mean, Ellie, good job. Dad told me that. Or at least put him on the heater. Yeah, yes. And she did it. She did it with heart. She did it with heart. He's got
I'm going to preface this a little bit, and so then move on. But it appears as though Buddhism was sort of a improvement on left-handed Hinduism, and Christianity has tried to improve as we've moved along spiritual evolution. And so I just wondered if you comment on spiritual evolution a little bit.
Good question, probably out of my field, but it does lead to the idea that we are all incarnating, even our invisible world is incarnating now. I was thinking, I don't think gnomes have an idea that they want to be a fairy, nor do I think fairies want to be a deva, but I do know that there is a process. And I have experienced one time at the spring solstice with Buddha that was the most powerful experience I've ever had. And another powerful experience was actually, and often is, at Christmas time. It is as if that kingdom is closer to us, even if we are not Christian. It is that kingdom. I think we're all going in the same direction, but I can only speak of my own experiences, what little there is.
Well, you mentioned, grandchildren and things, and so I just wondered if there was more into that.
In other words, it's been my understanding from the teachers that I respect that we will incarnate peace, that it is not yet ours. We won't see it, sadly. However, we might be able to help improve that process. Those of us who lived through the 60s, we were very powerful in changing the course of a very difficult, horrible war. So we do have power, and we in a society as this, with this incredible deva, with these incredible understandings, have the ability to influence and help bring in those souls that will be instrumental in creating peace.